totally agree with your. I totally agree with your opinion that the colloquial, teaching colloquial Persian from the first level is really important. And actually, fortunately, in Korea, we started put the colloquial forms of Persian in the textbook. So I believe now that we are in the right way now. And in your paper, actually, in the proceedings, page 271, you have written incorrectly pronounced in terms of the colloquial Persian language in the first line. And actually, I'm not sure whether we can use incorrect here, because sometimes I hear a lot of Iranian people talk together, and they still they still pronounce their sentences with the written forms of Persian, like hopastit instead of hopastin. I don't know, but actually I'm not a native Persian speaker, but what I felt was that it's like it shows more courtesy, or sometimes when Iranian people want to make some sentences clear, that it seems that they use written form of Persian. And because they say these sentences, we also can refer this sentence to the colloquial forms. So I wonder if why you have chose the term incorrect here. And another question, you have conducted experiments with the non-native speakers with the upper intermediate students. And I wonder if you have considered their nationality and their errors in your experiments, because I think it might affect a lot with your data, because for some people who, for example, whose mother language is Korean, then they might use a lot of raw, compared to the other foreign students. And another question, I want to ask you your opinion about the colloquial grammar. Actually, you have mentioned about phonetic and phonological features in colloquial Persian, but as far as I know, there is a specific structure, in a syntactic level. For example, for some linguists, they say that in colloquial Persian, there is a definite article, like e. For example, un دختر دانشجوی منه, like this. So, and another example might be, there comes a verb, and then there comes location later. For example, 미랑후배. So I want to ask you your opinion that, in your opinion, we have to teach the colloquial grammar as well from the first stage of teaching Persian. Yeah.
No. Thank you, Professor Kwak. And our next discussant is Kim Jung-ah from Hangul University for Foreign Studies.
Thank you. Really, I am very much honored to be here with your scholars. This title, first of all, what can Arabic literature offer in times of conflict? So when I read that the title, it's really suitable title for this conference. So we have the title Rising Conflict in the period of new diaspora, something like that. So it's a really well selected title, and I do appreciate to Dr. Laila because last 3 days I read these books. I completed. Alhamdulillah, we have translated books, this Bamboo Stalk in Korean language. So it was so wonderful and nice time. And anyhow, this book, it's very specific style, like metafiction, because that Jose Mendoza, he is the writer, and Ibrahim Salam, he is the translator, and Kaola Rashid, who is the sister of Jose Mendoza in the story. So she is the editor. So that this literary work has very specific style, and I really appreciate of that point to reading on new books. And I have a lot of common feelings which I can share with that education style, so education Arabic through literary work. Because in this semester also, I use that kind of education style. For example, I introduce some Arabic stories, which like Juha story and some kind of anecdotes. So for example, I selected 4 or 5 like Omar wal Marat al Jariya. So in this title, we can explain what's going on in that 7th century, the Southern Islam. So second Caliph Omar, I can explain it. And then about the Al-Marat al-Jariya, so what's going on there, the Sifa al-Ism, so like that. And the second one was As-Sariq al-Surika. So also I can explain that the Ism Mawsul al-Abi, and then As-Sariq al-Surika, so the form of Mazkur, like that. And last one was Akram min al-Hakim. So it was very famous story, Akram min al-Hakim, the name of man Hakim. So I can explain it, what's going on, this comparative style in Arabic grammar. So it was really a nice experience, and then I'm very happy to share the same educational style. So my last remark is, what is your criteria for selecting literary work to use that kind of education system? And if it is possible, could you introduce the best result, what you experienced with the students in your class? That's quite a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our third discussant is Seo Jung-min. She challenges me a lot since she came back from the USA. The method of Arabic teaching is wrong here. So please.
So without further ado, please allow me to start this discussion with a few questions for you. So first, your research study examined the MSA and CA features and patterns displayed by IA trained learners in their speech productions during their years of Arabic studies. So it appears that you mainly dealt with the features of lexicon more than just the sentence structures and pronunciations. So do you have any specific reasons for heavy focus on vocabulary features and patterns? And as we often explore the differences in sentence structures and pronunciations as well when we evaluate the teaching of MSA and CA, so would you please share with us your insights or relevant examples and data on this issue, please? This is my first one. Second, according to the results of the study, of your study, first-year participants showed preference for CA, colloquial Arabic features. Second-year students, second-year participants, they displayed a distinct mixture of MSA and CA, while third-year students, participants, they incorporated more MSA features in their speech productions. So, in my opinion, these results imply that the participants, they learned Arabic with the exact same way or same method as they learned their native tongue. So to elaborate, newborn babies are born start speaking by mimicking their mother's speaking patterns. And as they grow older and they learn the written form of language, then they will incorporate more written forms of language in their speech productions. So I think this sequence appears to be very similar to the learning steps experienced by participants in their learning of Arabic. So are you of the view that the participants in your study who study Arabic as a foreign or second language go through the same steps of learning as native speakers of Arabic? My last question relates to one of the results of your study, showing that the participants use MSA for their presentations and CA for their skits, which means that they know how to differentiate between two varieties, right? So do you think that the results of your study reflect the actual, their participants' actual language competence, and also provide evidence of their active or cognitive knowledge to separate between two, right? So just for the purpose of for discussion purposes, I put to you my argument that these participants have already learned and practiced the two varieties, which means that MSA and CA in their classes, and might be influenced by the instructors, teaching philosophy on the separation, on separating, these two varieties. So I think they might also have received guidance prior to the presentations and skits, and hence could have been advised, on the issue of separation between two varieties. So this was my last question.
Thank you.
So because we have one more. So yeah, this was my last question. So having laid out these questions, please allow me to hand the floor back to you. Thank you. Yeah.
As a lecturer in Arabic as a foreign language, I'm interested in contrasting linguistic analysis between my native Korean and target language Arabic. And I observe and study the difficulties Korean learners face in learning Arabic through preceding research and experimental classes. Dr. Faisal's study uses contrastive linguistic analysis to know the similarities and differences between Indonesian and Arabic. I think that contrastive linguistic analysis is a solution from learning language problem. But the structure of Korean language is so very different from that of Arabic language. So in fact, Korean learners of Arabic can't avoid the difficulties in studying Arabic. And in this study, Dr. Faisal used the descriptive qualitative method through technique collection data that used the documentation of Arabic and Indonesian dictionaries and books and articles in order for your valuable research to develop as a more academic paper. The detailed comparison and analysis of these technique collection data, examples, and between two languages in theoretical review and review chapter, and mistakes or errors analysis of Indonesian learners of Arabic will obtain more significant results in finding and discussion chapter, and is expected to be beneficial material for Indonesian learners of Arabic and for Indonesian teachers of Arabic. I'd like to ask you one last question. In Dr. Faisal's opinion, what kind Indonesian learners find in learning Arabic besides differences in Arabic and Indonesian language structures? Thank you.
Thank you for your academical and valuable research about the effects of basic psychological needs, satisfaction on Arabic acquisition in a short time intensive Arabic camp. I think it's very authentic and useful subject and topics in the field of education Arabic language for students. In Korea, as you know, we have 5 universities which teach Arabic language and interpretation and translation between Korean and Arabic and area of studies of Middle East. But until now, unfortunately, we didn't have intensive Arabic language learning camp like you, like Japan. So I think you are a pioneer who organized this intensive Arabic language learning camp in Japan and in Asia. I think so. So I as a Korean professor want to know about the content of language book, course book, which used in this camp, and what kind of the course book was used. You developed independent developed language course book, or you use written another course book. And I think there are some teachers and instructors who joined this camp. How many teachers and instructors involved in this camp? For I think the 50 students.
Yeah.
About
Per year.
50 participants. And then, in my opinion, before organizing this camp or after organizing this camp, we need to educate or some program for teaching teachers, teaching instructors, because they have to have one educational goal in some activities during class or after class. You mentioned, as you mentioned, this camp were organized during 25 hours. So it is better than there is some one unit curriculum for teaching students activities or grammars or listening. And I want to know how the educational program was in a day. There are 4 skills for learning languages: reading and writing, listening, and etc. So, and then in this article, I think there are some results of data satisfaction before class and after class. So it would be better than some detailed questions are added in sub-survey. For example, why do the students are satisfied with their competence and relatedness during the camping duty? There is some data of satisfaction from 0 to 10. So why they think about that, how they are motivated in studying and learning Arabic. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee.
Because the participants in your study, they started to love both MSA and CA from the very beginning of their Arabic study. But many students worldwide, including Korean students, they just learn MSA, so it might be very difficult. They may encounter difficulties studying colloquial Arabic in the middle of their study, like second or third year Arabic. So in view of this, do you suggest any, just like this is effective teaching methods applicable for these kind of students, because this is, I just incorporated, colloquial Arabic for second and third year students. Sometimes they refuse to learn colloquial Arabic because this is kind of new language for them. So because they students doesn't, learn, they don't have, they just start zero, even though they are second or third year students. Yeah, that's my additional question.
Sure.
Yeah.
2015 and for about
And
16 and 16 twice. Okay. Now we are living in 2019. Is there any other intensive language can have it or not? And I want to know that the modern standard Arabic and colloquial Arabic program for teaching was included in curriculum of Japanese university or in this camp? I want to.
The simple and naive question is, I heard your papers and I realized that it's a trend of teaching languages, not just a standard language, but colloquial. And Dr. Bahrani also, he said that we must teach Persian, colloquial Persian from the beginning. From the beginning, and Professor also, Rama also mentioned about that you just start colloquial and standard MSA and CA together, I think, in your university. But I wonder that in Arabic case, I think it's more complicated than Persian Arabic. So is anybody can answer that, the degree or difference degree between colloquial Persian and standard Persian, the difference between those of two, and MSA and CA. So I want to figure out that between Persian and Arabic. So anyone among you, if answer it, it would be appreciated. Thank you very much. And then Dr. Bahrami first.
Okay, thank you very much. 3 questions raised, okay. Number 1, as I noted, okay, was about whether the politeness and courtesy is observed within the colloquial Persian or not. For sure. Persian language, the colloquial spoken Persian can be classified into formal spoken Persian and informal spoken Persian. And then both of them are spoken Persian. They are quite different from written Persian, but politeness, courtesy, respect to the seniority, okay, are observed within the spoken Persian, that is the fully spoken, through combination of phrases and then terminology employed. For example, I have got 4 questions for those who are Farsi speakers and teachers of Persian language. They would realize that 4 of them are Persian language spoken form, but courtesy is injected within these 4 questions through combination of words, not applying and then employing the written form to convey the courtesy. Question number 1 with the least politeness, okay, میخوام چیزی ازتون بپرسم. Quite friendly, intimate, and then a colleague type of conversation with the same peer level, no seniority observed here. Next one. میتونم یه چیزی ازتون بپرسم. Therefore, now the questioner is giving a respectful status to the one the question is being asked. Now, going higher and then providing the other one addressee with the professor status, اجازه دارم چیزی ازتون بپرسم. Means, will you give me the permission to ask you a question? But the first one was, I want to ask you a question. The second one, can I ask you a question? The last one, I think, just quickly I tried to take note of, Dr. Sarah, was that اجازه میدین چیزی ازتون بپرسم. You see, this one gives the ball to the court of the addressee leaving everything within its discretion, whether you let me ask a question or you won't let me ask the question. I am the least in this position. So then second question raised was nationality as a variable to be taken into consideration while analyzing the mistakes of the people. Unfortunately, the number of participants in my study were not that many. Okay, I have 4 Koreans and 2 Europeans, so I did not apply the nationality. But it's a very good suggestion to see how much the mother tongue, okay, can play a role in defining and determining these application of the written structure to the spoken structure. It's a good idea. And then finally, the last one is about the syntactical, analysis of the spoken Persian with the, written Persian. For example, you mentioned Miram Khune, that is the most colloquial form rather than Khune Miram. Okay, I think both of them are quite colloquial. I'm not in favor of going into that much sophisticated, presentation of syntactic spoken Persian at the very beginning. I think I'm in favor of just presenting the spoken Persian at the beginning, as normally we go through with the easiest one and then gradually making it more difficult and helping them to get to the, deeper, let's say, levels, but let them practice swimming in the shallow waters, okay? But a real practice. That's all I could present in this short term. But later on I can have discussions with Dr. Sarah, okay? She's always initiator of ideas. In fact, this idea I went through this one was through the questions she raised when I was here, okay? Frequently we used to meet each other and then she used to ask me questions, okay? And then sometimes some of them, okay, stuck to my mind and then think of answers. Thank you very much, Dr. Sar.
Thank you, Dr. Bahrami. And Dr. Laila Familia. So I think the main question is how do I choose these texts, right, before I simplify them. And the main thing to remember is that this is a literary piece by an author who is very proud of his or her work. So it's not my role here to come and chop, the novel and mix the ingredients again and produce something that is simplified just for the learner. So the first factor I take into account is the original novel interesting? Is the plot engaging to start with? Second factor I take into account is the language and structure used by the author. Simple, so meaning, to start with, his language or her language is not very complex because it will make it more difficult to simplify. And then not many structural complexities in terms of flashbacks and things like that. To a certain extent, yes, but if it's very complex, then I will not be able to kind of play with the work. And then you need to be very sensitive to keeping the style of the novelist. So simplify it to the extent that it still sounds as if the original author wrote it. So that's why every time I finish the work, I give it to the author and say, okay, this is what I did. If it's agreeable to you and you think it's okay to publish, let's do it. And most of the times, the 2 times I did this, they told me, I didn't notice any difference, kind of. So yeah, I take out some of the more descriptive passages. I do not change the action. I do not change the the ending or anything like that. I keep it as it is in a more simplified way. So that's basically what I do. And then your second question was how do students react usually to this? I have to say, that they love it because it's a change from the textbook for them. It's something fun to read. It's literature. Most of the people read literature. And they can do different things, different type of activities outside of the textbook, whatever it is the textbook. So yeah, that's, they usually like it. Yes.
So any experience to choose the classical literary work like the Quran or Hadith Nabawi?
We don't usually use these texts because they are much more difficult.
and you are not going to simplify the Quran or the Hadith. I would get into trouble if I did that.
You can change your style, just simplify it as it is. You can use some parts of Quran. Yeah.
So yeah, classical literature is more difficult than contemporary language. Yes, that's why.
Excuse me, I have a question, but I want to ask it in Arabic language. بالنسبة لاختيارك للنصوص باعتبار أنني أدرس مهارة القراءة فهم المقروء، نحن عندنا فئتين من الناطقين بغيرها، فئة المسلمين الذين مثل باكستان، ماليزيا، إيران يتعلمون هذه النصوص، وفئة غير المسلمين مثل كوريا، فلبين. هل هناك فرق في اختيار هذه النصوص للفئتين؟ هذا سؤالي الأول. السؤال الثاني، باعتبار نحن يجب أن نراعي المستويات، بالنسبة للإطار الأمريكي هناك معيار أكتفل في اختيار المستويات، المستوى الأول، الثاني، الثالث إلى 11 مستوى، أو الإطار الأوروبي فإنه يعتمد على 9 مستويات. هل هناك يعني يجب أن نراعي المستوى الأول الذي لا يعرف ولا كلمة ولا يعرف أي شيء؟ هل هناك يعني معايير خاصة لاختيار هذه المستويات؟
طبعا يعني أنا عندما بسطت هاتين الروايتين إلى المستوى الذي ستجدينه أخذت بعين الاعتبار في الحقيقة الطلاب الذين أنا درستهم يعني في مسيرتي. وعندما بدأت هذا المشروع كنت في جامعة تكساس في أوستن، فطلابنا كانوا يتعرضون للكتاب، الكتاب في تعلم اللغة العربية. فأنا جزء كان حتى الجزء الثاني، لأن بعد الجزء الثاني كنا ننتقل إلى الأدب. فأنا وضعت بعين الاعتبار الحقيقة ما يعرفه الطالب أيضا.
باعتبار المستوى الأول الأدنى، المبتدئ الأدنى، المبتدئ المتوسط.
طبعا أنا مشيت على مستوى على معايير أكتفل.
نعم، الأمريكي.
أنا تبعت الإطار الأمريكي، ولكن في النهاية يعني إذا كان يعني advanced أو B1 أو يعني B2 يعني حسب يعني سيدي وحبيبي مناسبة لطلاب ال B1 أو ال Intermediate High Advanced Low. أما رواية ساق البامبو فهي أعلى قليلا، ربما أيضا لأنها أطول والنشاطات المتطلبة من الطالب هي أكثر تعقيدا.
لأن أفكار فلسفية وأفكار دينية فهي تحتاج إلى تعقيد وهي معقدة كثيرا، لأن أنا قلت لكم شاهدت وبعض القراءات يعني هي معقدة جدا وتحتاج إلى يعني أظن المستوى المتقدم أو المتميز.
في الحقيقة المتميز في الرواية لا، ربما في المسلسل لأنه باللهجة الكويتية وهو موجه للناطق باللغة العربية، فهذا مستوى مختلف. لذلك تم تبسيط الرواية حتى تتماشى هي والنشاطات مع مستوى الطالب. فلا أظن أني وضعت بعين الاعتبار إن كان الطالب مسلم أو غير مسلم، لأنه أعتقد أن القضية الرئيسية اللي هي قضية الهوية وتشكيل الهوية الدينية والثقافية
ولكن هو يتعرض لها. لا غير ساق البامبو بالنسبة للنصوص الأخرى نسألك.
لا أضع بعين الاعتبار إن كان الطالب من ديانة أو جنسية معينة، لأنني أعتبر أن الأدب في الأساس كتبه الكاتب للعالم.
لا أعرف، ولكن الثقافة العربية يعني الثقافة الإسلامية العربية، لأن هي مرتبطة كثيرا بالعربية. فقط سألتك يعني هل هناك فصل بين هذه الأمور؟
ليس بالنسبة لي. شكرا.
Thank you. Our next. Dr. Rama, you have a lot of questions.
She gave me very insightful questions, actually. Thank you so much, Dr. Janmin. With regard to the first question about the features that I focused on, I did actually study Lexis, but I tried to, as I mentioned in the presentation, I tried to represent a variety that is typically represented in the speech of Arabic speakers. When I started from scratch. I did not have any previous studies among learners of Arabic to begin with, and that I let the data guide me. I started to see what came up. I did actually look into syntactic and morphosyntactic features, and also looked into discourse level features as well, like discourse shifts. I see your points about phonology, which is also important. I considered it in Lexis though. So for example, say in my categorization of shared features, there are shared words in Fusha and Aramiya. أول, آخر, أخيرا. We use them, it's common. Bait. As long as the consonantal structure was intact, I considered it shared. But when the student changes something about the phonological feature of the word, so azim versus azim, I considered azim MSA, and I considered azim CA. So that played into it. Probably it was not as explicit, simply because of the limitations of the presentation. I did not have time to represent, especially the syntactic features that I did look into bilingual, studies of bilingual code switching. So it's only an issue of time limitations. And there's also so much that you can do within a specific set of data. It's like, seriously, it was like sinking in a sea of data. And just things keep coming up, a lot of things, a lot of fascinating features, and it's an issue of choice. What would, for the time being, serve the purposes of the study and would also resonate with other studies among Arabic speakers. But definitely, I would like to delve into that further and see what the data can give me. With the second question about going through the stages that also are similar to children, or how children acquire L1 for Arabic speakers, two things to consider here. First of all, the process of second language acquisition is different from first language acquisition, even though there are similarities. And for Arabic speakers, when they start learning MSA, they've already had years of exposure to colloquial Arabic before they start. So we cannot actually follow the same process. The parameters are different, but we can build on these features. We can emulate the process. So in language acquisition, we start like children. We start with the here and now, the concrete, the personal, and then we build up to the there and then. And that also aligns with principles. Principles of cognitive psychology, moving from the here and now to the here and then. So if we follow that, we facilitate the acquisition process in general for the participants. With number 3, whether they had awareness, it's a byproduct of their training. For example, in second year, when I asked the instructor about the instructions, I asked her, what were the task instructions when the participant asked her if they can use CA? She said, speak Arabic. Just speak Arabic. There were no instructions on what to use. Same thing for first year. I was one of the professors of third year. I did not give specific instruction, but they know. By virtue of training, when you introduce MSA and CA, you do not leave the students to wander and get lost. You explain to them that they're, register, and they also, in a process of acquisition, they understand when they watch different settings and different videos, they know what's appropriate, and we discuss it explicitly, so they develop that knowledge, and that goes also into their production.
Which means that they are, anyway, that's influenced by,
they are influenced by the training.
Teaching,
Absolutely,
right?
it is part of their training. It has to be awareness raising for the participants.
Thank you very much. I thought we can use coffee break time, but they said we should finish earlier than 4:40. So, Dr. Faisal.
Can I?
Yeah.
1 minute only.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Hansucho, and only thank you for Sister Dr. Munjia about the question. I think everybody learn in Arabic is different in the first language. I think we have a difficult. For example, Indonesian difficult is for spelling. I think spelling is very, very difficult. We didn't have any hope. Al-Harb, مثلا, C machine, we didn't have that. And then the Ammiya language, I think it's very difficult one. It's problem. I think the Indonesians sometimes are confused. For example, in Syria, Jibhala, Kifhala, Jibhala. And another, I think in Muslim, Ya Jamal, Ya Gamal, Auze. I think it is in Indonesian, for that it is very, very difficult. And the last, I want to appreciate for the committee, and I think thank you very much for this invitation. And Manaso Bungaw, nice to meet you. Thank you very much. social media. Thank you, thank you.
Okay, to make it brief, the books I used in the camp is Al-Kitab, and because usually in that time, I think no teachers used Al-Kitab in Japan. So I wanted to introduce with the DVD, and also I think the advanced class was they used Al-Kitab al-Asasi. Yes. And how many instructors? We had 4 native speakers of Arabic, and also 4 Japanese instructors of Arabic. And also we had an assistant for administrative work. And also about the teaching workshop, like the training for the instructors. Yes, and before the camp, only this one day, but I invited the Qasim Mahma, who is Egyptian, who's been teaching in AUC and also in the States for many years. So I invited him as the center of the professors, because he's been lots of experiences, and he's very energetic. And so he gave us a workshop. And also in the not the different time from the camp, I hold a workshop in the port in Tokyo, maybe like once a year. And then it gathered all the Japanese, not all, but many of the Japanese instructors. And then I also invite the native speaker of Arabic as a lecturer, so that we can learn, how to teach. Because in Japan, our way of teaching is, I think, far behind like the United States. They really tend to focus on the traditional way of teaching, the grammar and reading, and also the translation. But I really want to, introduce more communication and speaking. That's why I did this intensive camp. And also, in the future, I will. No, I don't think so, because I held this, the 2 years twice, because I got the governmental fund from the Japanese government. But this is as a research. That's why I crammed before about this self-determination theory, how we can improve the motivation, and also the Arabic language. So that I got the governmental fund. So the students, they paid only maybe $300. So I could pay for the instructors from my governmental fund, not from the students. So that's why, and then it made me very tired, because I did everything, like a travel agent. I made the reservation of the bus from the station to the camp venue and everything I did. So, and also I invited, the Egyptian professors and so maybe if I get the fund again, I may do it, but I'm not sure. And then, so that camp was concentrated on MSA, because only for 1 week, and I just wanted to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your nice